Good evening, evening. I don't know how many we're going to have joining us this week. We've got Worcester folks having their homebrew meeting as we speak, so they're not going to be here this evening. But as always, Rich, say hello.
Hey, good evening. Hope everyone's ready for the beer.
Yeah, I think we ought to just get straight into it. What do you think?
I think that's probably a good idea.
So this one's a bit more modern than all the other styles we've done so far. We're looking at a New England IPA. And this was finally added as a provisional style to the guidelines not all that long ago. And it's now showing up under 21B Specialty IPA New England IPA. So we have the style guide on the screen. Hello, Richard Merton. How are you doing? Oh, that smells nice.
Got priorities right in the beer.
Yeah, got to get in the beer. Okay, so the aroma, we're looking for an intense hop aroma, typically with fruity qualities. Stone fruit, tropical fruit, and citrus are the most common. And they're reflective of the newer American and New World hop varieties without being grassy or herbaceous. Should be clean, natural malt in the background, potentially with a light bready sweetness, without caramel or toast. Absence of any malt character is a fault. Neutral to fruity fermentation character that is well integrated with the hops. A creamy, buttery, or acidic aroma is inappropriate. Any perceived alcohol character should be restrained and never hot.
Excellent. So, what are people getting from this?
I'm certainly getting hops.
Yeah, just one or two. A lot more than some of our previous beers.
Definitely. Definitely indeed. And I think that's one of the nice things with it not being one of the classics. It's got room for interpretation still.
Mm-hmm.
It showcases the hops instead of being more reliant on some of the more traditional hop varieties that we've seen. And I particularly like the way that this one is designed to be all about those newer hop varieties.
Yeah, indeed. With this style, pretty much all the classic examples are nigh on impossible to get, the commercial examples in the UK. Even though we do have some good ones here, there is very American centric in the classic examples. I think I've had a couple of these at big beer festivals and things, but no more than that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the list. So Hill Farmstead Susan, Other Half Green Diamonds Double IPA, Tired Hands Alien Church, Treehouse Julius, Trillium Congress Street, and Weldworks Juicy Bits. I haven't had any of those, and I don't actually recall even seeing any of them.
It may not be in the UK. I think I had the Hill Farmstead and the Trillium. It's either at a UK beer festival or in the US. I've certainly had them somewhere, but they're not that different from the UK examples. The bigger ones, not necessarily this one.
Yeah, I mean, the place it was most likely to be for me was the American Beer Bear at the GBBF, but I don't remember seeing any of them. But I do definitely remember Dragon's Milk. That was a lovely impy stout.
Yeah, there was some of them were. I think one of Cloudwater's big events had some of those breweries. I can't remember it was there I had those brew beers or somewhere else. I've certainly seen Hill Farmstead at one of that sort of thing in the UK.
Yeah, it might have been that, or it might have been Beavertown's Extravaganza.
Yeah, could have been, yeah.
Because I know they had some big American ones over for that. Okay, so we've had a few comments in. David's never had this beer before. Well, I hope you'll let us know what you think about it, David. And Don says very fruity with some vanilla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely fruity. If we can go any more detail on the fruit, is it tropical? Is it citrus? Is it pom, so apple pear? or grape, or any other type of fruit. So got some Keith. Go on, you got it.
Yeah, Keith's given us some good pointers there. He's getting lots of peach, tangerine, and pineapple. Yeah, I can certainly see tangerine and pineapple, and maybe a bit of overripe peach. Perhaps I'm getting.
Mango's a classic from Don.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Low white bread and grainy supporting malt from Keith. Yeah, definitely. You know there's malt there. Sometimes you don't. You get pure fruit juice. And that would actually be out of style if you couldn't detect the malt. But again, and I do keep repeating this simply because it needs saying. These style guidelines are literally only for judging beer at a competition that is using these style guidelines. They don't in any way dictate what you can brew, what you should brew, what brewers brew. We are just using commercial beers in this example because they're easy for everyone to get hold of. If you had this served up to you as a homebrew at a homebrew competition, entered into 21B, that's New England IPA, that's what we're judging it as. However, it doesn't mean that other beers aren't good because they haven't got malt in them. It just means that in this instance where we're judging it as if it was a competition, it would be out of style without malt.
Yeah, breweries often use the styles as a starting point for a descriptor, and they're sort of shorthand often. They don't quite mean it in as much detail as in something like this, but you could say sort of a porter with something else. It's a starting point. It's a shorthand for description.
Yeah. And I mean, there's other breweries that have never read the style guidelines in their life.
Yeah.
And they've got something that's like a best bitter and they're calling it a wee heavy and things like that. David's come in with tropical fruits like mango, peach, passion fruit, a little bit of soft malt coming through like white pan bread, not getting any buttery or acidic smells. And again, yes, it's good to call out the things you're not getting.
Yeah, I really like passion fruit in that. I definitely get passion fruit in this.
Yeah, I've been very careful not to mention it so far because I wanted to see if someone else would pick it up.
Yeah.
So what's everyone's beer at? Mine's a little bit cold because I had to nip it in the fridge quick because I've been out this evening. First time out in a pub for probably about 18 months, and it was lovely to be able to go out again.
So is anyone getting any other malt aromas coming through there? I'm not getting. It suggests that you shouldn't have caramel or toast. I sort of agree. I'm not getting either in this case.
I mean, for me, it's definitely got some of the bready doughy that's already been called out.
Yeah.
Not getting much darker, so I mean, I'm getting kind of wheat. Not even getting any crust type notes, so even just slightly harder roasted stuff I'm not getting at all. It's literally all very pale malt.
Yeah,
and possibly unmalted wheat in there as well. I'm not sure what they use. Does it say on the back? I haven't even got my reading specs in here.
It does tell us the hops, which is nice. It suggests we should be getting stone fruit and citrus. I'm not getting a lot of citrus. Like, it could be what we're thinking of as the passion fruit.
It could be. I mean, someone did call out tangerine. Was it Key?
Yeah, cool. I like that.
So I mean, I'm getting some of that, but it's your mellower citrus, if you know what I mean. Your sweeter citrus rather than your grapefruit and lemon. papaya and pineapple are also getting called out on the can. Unless that's pairing. I'm not sure what that symbol next to it represents.
I think it's supposed to be a nose in a like a modification of this very strange Cyclops thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, papaya is a description I use quite a bit. I'm not really getting it off this.
It's one fruit I've never actually had, or not knowingly had, so it's not one I particularly use commonly. David says normally I find Galaxy and Nelson would get a much more punchy aroma. It depends how you use the hops, obviously, at what stage, how much of them, and everything. You can, if you're not using a lot of one or UR, then it can totally change the flavour and aroma over if you swap them over. I mean, I'm definitely getting undertones of Galaxy, and I am getting some grape type aromas from it. So I can see both of them being used there. In what quantities and at what point in the process, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's seeing those two hops. I can tie that to the aroma. A combo of tropical and passion fruity stuff. Yeah, that could easily come from those two hops. But yeah, I've had ones with more aroma. I'm getting more than I normally do. If I put this into a normal pint glass or something, you get a lot less aroma than something more like this. And also, I'm positively sniffing it as opposed to just drinking it.
The thing with a lot of the New England IPAs, the way a lot of brewers are brewing them, is we're getting to the point where they're not putting any early hops in at all. Sometimes they're all late hops. Some people are even going a bit berserk and not putting any hops in at all until it gets to the whirlpool. So how much and how intense the hop flavors and aromas are from each hop can be heavily influenced by where in the process they're put in. So, I mean, if it's all really late in the whirlpool, you'll normally find they get a bit more punch than if they're earlier. Galaxy can be a little hit or miss. It's been my go-to favorite fruity hop for a very long time, ever since Dirkster did Hophead Galaxy, which I will never forget that beer, even though it was a single 3-month run as a one-off special. Their Hophead, just done single hop with Galaxy, was absolutely stunning. And ever since then, I've been addicted to Galaxy. But sometimes I find it can be very punchy, and then another batch, it's nowhere near as intense. So whether that's a harvest to harvest variation or what, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've got a couple of bags of Galaxy in the fridge downstairs for the next NEIPA. You get to a huge amount of it with doing this style of beer, though. It can get quite expensive.
This Galaxy and Vic's Secret are my go-tos for fruitier beers. Okay, so based on what we've all been saying about the aroma and what we should be getting, what are people scoring it? If I put the score sheet up, I did have the score sheet here somewhere, but it's gone. Too many windows open. There. So, for aroma, we've talked about the malt, we've talked about the hops. We haven't really talked about esters or other aromatics. We are getting some esters there, I think. It's one of those beers where the hop fruitiness is so intense, it's hard to separate out exactly what you're getting from what, I think. But I think we're getting some esters there from fermentation. So out of 12 points, what are people going to give this one?
Yeah, it can sometimes be quite difficult in beers like this to actually separate fruit esters from hop-derived fruit aromas. A lot of them can be really similar, especially around your sort of stone fruit and grapey areas.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't got too many people here tonight, so I'll go ahead and score it. I mean, I'd say for me, we're talking. We're getting malt. We're getting neutral. Yeah. I'd say it's probably about 10 or 11. I'm getting what I should be getting. I would like a little bit more hop. It's supposed to be intense. I'd say this is high. I'm not sure it's quite intense.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you about 10 probably. Asking for a little bit more hop aroma. There's none of the flaws or other things that I mentioned in there are present, so there's not a lot to knock it down on. Yeah, it's generally good if a little restrained in the hops.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, other than that, for me, it's more or less on the money. Just as we've said a few times in this series, it could do with a bit more. So what scores have we got coming in? We have got a 10. Would like a bit more malt character and won't call this intense hop aroma. Yeah, agreed. You're right. It's not intense. 10 from Keith as well. And a 9 from Peter. More hop aroma, please, basically. Yeah. I think we're all agreed on that. That a little bit more hop, and this would be right up there as a world-class example. So let's talk about the appearance then. We've got colour ranges from straw to yellow, sometimes with an orange hue. Hazy, often opaque. Clarity should not be cloudy or murky. And I think that's worth repeating. The clarity should not be cloudy or murky, because very often you see people intensely trying to get as much murk in there as possible. Even to the point where they start doing stuff like pouring flour in the mash and everything just to try and make it as murky and as opaque as possible. The opacity can add a shine to the beer, and if you've seen a beer where that's happening, you'll know exactly what that means, and it can make the colour seem a bit darker. Any visible floating particulates are a fault. It's medium to rocky meringue white head with high to very high retention. So what were people's heads like? I remember it pouring with a nice head. I don't remember it hanging around too long.
No, mine faded really fast. So there's a bit of a ring left.
Yeah, I mean,
nice head, but faded really fast.
I can bring up a very small head by shaking it about again, but again, it goes practically straight away.
Which is a little bit strange in this sort of style where you'd expect to be a fair amount of protein in there to help hold it up. Often I wouldn't mark beers down much, if at all, for just having a slightly fadey head. I'd mention it, but probably if the rest was fine, probably still mark them a 3 on this. But because this one calls out specifically very high retention, it's a sort of area I might start marking down on.
Yeah, so I mean, I've just opened the second can and given it a freshen up, and
better.
The moosey head is a nice call for this. I think that describes it quite well. But again, the head is fading pretty rapidly. I'm not really getting too much of a shine on this, but it is, I think the call out about the opacity can make it a little darker is valid here. It does seem to be affected by the opacity a bit. But one thing I would love to say about this is it is not brown.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say next, that these things go dark, and that's a bad thing usually. This is where the trick on brewing these, as most you probably know, is that keeping the oxygen out, because oxidation does strange things to these styles. I did look at the chemistry at one point, but it's really complicated.
And it also does it very quickly. I've had people report an absolutely stunning beer and 3 days later be absolutely undrinkable. Whereas normally oxidation takes a lot longer than that to have much of an impact on beers. Literally, it can go from beautiful to undrinkable in days. There's just so much hop in there and so much oxygen just doesn't mix at all with it.
Yeah, I mean, people often do sealed transfers and things just to make sure that no oxygen gets anywhere near their beer.
Yeah, it's the safest thing.
Okay.
So, head faded fast. The head was good when poured, but has faded now from Richard Martin. Head is lasting better on the second can from Keith Bailey.
So, yeah, the difference between cloudy and murky is an interesting query. It's sort of a level of where the light's still getting through it. And when you can actually see, positively opaque as opposed to light can get through hazy, but not really through cloudy as much. It's my usual interpretation. You should be able to read through it, but you should be able to see a torch or a light through it. It's about the level you're looking for.
Yeah. Okay, and some nice description there from David. Craggy white head on pouring, but didn't last to the end. Pale straw-coloured hazy beer, exactly as you would want. Not murky, and no goldfish or other floaters. 3 for me, but would like a better head. Yeah, so anyone else want to come forward with the score? We're looking out of 3. Should be commenting on colour, clarity and head, the retention, the colour and the texture of the head. Nathan's got a great head on his. 3. That's nice to hear. I mean, the second can did seem to last, the head did seem to last a bit longer for me, but again, it's faded down to just a small ring around the edge. I can't tip it up too much because obviously the level does that. But yeah, it looked great on initial pour. As others have said, no goldfish in it, no floaters. It's not murky, it's hazy. Yeah. I think, much like Rich said, I'll probably dock it 1 for the head retention, simply because it does call out specifically a high to very high retention, and the beer doesn't have that for me.
Yeah, with homebrew ones of these, especially if people have tried to bottle condition them, you do quite often get floaty bits that can either be yeast coming off the bottom, which is fairly common, or chunks of hop pellet is also quite common, and that's really quite unpleasant if you start drinking chunks of hop pellet.
Yeah.
Less common in commercial ones because they've probably filtered it.
Richard says he wanted to reduce it a bit because of the lack of head retention, but for him it would probably only be a quarter or half a point.
Don't do fractional points around here.
Yeah, that's the bit. We don't normally do fractional points, so it's like you either, especially when you've only got 3 points to begin with, you either end up knocking a whole point off or giving it full marks. So for me, in any other beer, like Rich hinted at, I would have probably just given it the full marks. But because this style specifically calls out that it must have a high head retention, I felt I had to knock something off this beer.
Yeah, the other one we've tried that was similar. If its head had failure, would be the Hefeweizen. Because I think that calls out a big fluffy head as well. Yeah. Once again, it's got loads of protein in it from the adjuncts.
I mean, David did call out earlier his go-to NEIPA is Even Sharks Need Water, which is a lovely example. And the head on that lasted great from what I can remember. If I remember right, I had a can of that when I was judging a competition a while back.
Did you do the Verdant one?
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't they send us a can? Was it Headband they sent us, or was it Sharks?
No, I think it was Sharks. We had a can of Sharks in the box. I'm sure I had a can of Sharks in the box.
Yeah, I think so. That was an interesting competition.
It was all about NEIPAs, and at least half of
Oxidation.
mine were badly oxidized,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
same here. But there were some really good ones in there as well.
Yeah, that was when I did the video on the one thing you have to fix before you brew a NEIPA. Because after that, yeah, there was some pretty examples of what oxygen does to a NEIPA. So Richard didn't want to go down to 2, so we'll give it a 3. Don gives it a 2. The head fade in the description calls for high head retention. Yeah, in line with what we were thinking. Peter Olding, good colour, clarity, but head didn't last for more than a few seconds. They don't even have a ring on theirs, so yeah, it's good reason to knock it. Right, let's move on to the flavour then. So a high hop flavour or very high, and it reflects the same characteristics as the aroma. The emphasis is on fruit with ripe tropical fruit, stone fruit and citrus being most common. And it's worth noting that they specifically call out ripe tropical fruit. So you can expect, or you should expect, the warmer type flavours there from the ripeness. The perceived bitterness can be somewhat low to medium high. Have you ever had an example with a medium high bitterness, Rich?
They've got bitterer. They've got less bitter.
Yeah.
The original high ones were a bit more bitterer than they are now. And I think some of the American ones spread over a wider range from memory. But yeah, most of the ones we can get now are low to almost nothing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think it must probably be from those American examples that are more bitter, or perhaps, like you say, the older ones, because the newer ones are all right down at the low end, often hardly detectable. Often masked by the body and finish of the beer. The hop character in the aftertaste should not be sharp or harsh. And again, that's worth remembering because that can happen in quite a few examples. Low to medium malt flavour is generally neutral, sometimes bready, grainy, or lightly sweet. Noticeable toast or caramel flavours, just like with the aroma, is a flaw. You can have a neutral to fruity fermentation character, but it should be supportive of the hops. Off-dry to medium finish. Creamy, starchy, or sugary sweet flavours are inappropriate, although a high ester level and low bitterness may give the impression of up to moderate sweetness. A moderate supportive alcohol character is acceptable but should never be hot or dominating. Again, I wonder if that's more about the American ones, because I've never had really much noticeable alcohol in this style.
Yeah, there's some of the things that would probably be classified as double IPAs mostly are quite close to the style and can have a touch of alcohol. Or even the ones that go up to call themselves triples. But yeah, it's pretty rare.
I mean, this one's 5.9 and it's hidden well by everything else. Yeah. So if it's much more detectable than that, it makes me wonder how strong the beer is to begin with, because it's hidden so well.
Yeah, this range does go up to 9 on the ABV.
Woohoo! So yeah, officially starts at 6, so this is officially under. Just.
Yeah. Quite a lot of the British examples are right at the bottom end there.
Yeah, didn't we say that I think there's a duty point somewhere down there that it would cross? Okay, so we've got comments on the flavour. What are people getting? Does it give them what they think it should? Is there anything missing? And what would they score it out of 20? So again, the things we should be commenting on here is the malt, the hops, any fermentation characteristics, the balance, anything in the finish aftertaste, or any other flavour characteristics. And just to remind you again, my 3 things, you're talking what type, and how much of it. So it's not just malty or hoppy, it's what type of hops. Is it tropical fruit, and is it a lot of them, a little of them? Is it intense? I mean, for me, again, I'm going to go out on a limb here now before everyone's commented and say I don't consider this to be intense hop flavors. But then again, for flavor, it's high to very high.
Interesting query there from Nathan about the description of stone fruit being a bit ambiguous. My usual interpretation of stone fruit is it is peaches and that family, so nectarines, and there's a few others around that sort of area. Plums are right on the end of it. I'd probably call out plum directly, and definitely not cherries. Cherries is something you call out as cherries. But yeah, it's not very clear what it means in just calling it stone fruits. A lot of fruit have stones in them.
For me, I've always considered it as appropriate for the beer style. So if you've got darker beer styles and it says things like stone fruits, then I'll consider plum to be appropriate. If it's lighter styles, I'll consider peach nectarine. So yeah.
Yeah. Plum is still one of those ones that's right on the edge for me, whether I call it now. I think I probably agree with your interpretation. It depends on the style a bit. Yeah, prunes I tend to call out as dried, as Richard was asking. Definitely no avocado. I'm not sure we've done avocado as a Willet brew. It's got a lot of oil in it.
I think some people have done a guacamole beer, but I can't remember if they actually did avocado or just something that tasted like it.
Feeling we've done avocado as a Willet brew, and it was a pretty boring beer in the end.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few different beers like that where it sounds like it could be a good idea, but it actually doesn't come through in the finished beer.
Yeah, no, nothing we end up with that. Willet brew think it's a good idea to put in beer.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen. Well, let's just say people have decided they can put practically any botanical in beer. If it will grow, they've tried to brew it, whether it's a good idea or not. Unfortunately, not everyone's done it as a Willet Brew challenge. Some people have done it as a commercial beer. And sometimes you think, look, just because you can put that in a beer, it doesn't mean you should.
So for those of you who haven't heard about Willet Brews, it's something the Manchester Club does occasionally where you'll bring challenging ingredients to brew beers with. The only rules being it can't be poisonous to humans or yeast. And then we swap them around randomly and try and make beers out of them and bring them back a few meetings later to see what we end up with. And some of us have got a bit too extreme on it. So we've had dried pig's blood beer, brain beer, pig brain again, and yeah, also a few other weird things. I think we to stop the evil people who bring those in, who are mostly me. I think there's a no, you go brew with it instead being added to the rules. Pops it back to the evil person who brought it in.
I mean, what we did for a while was something not Willet Brew, but we did Can't Brew, Won't Brew, where sort of three of us, it was Alex from Mad Dog, Nick Swan and myself. We'll turn up at someone's house. We'll each bring a bag of base malt, a bag of specialty malt, and a special ingredient. And then we'll try and make a beer out of everything all three of us have brought along.
Yeah.
And we did actually have a couple of nice beers out of it, funnily enough. But you ended up with like some right strange combinations of malted wheat Pilsner and pale malt as the base, with a bit of chocolate. And I'm amazed that the beers came out as well as they did. So David had a cucumber sour once, bloody awful. Only just struggled through the pint. I'd say you were very brave to order a pint of it in the first place. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where I'll, do you mind if I have a sample of that one, please? And I'll just leave it at that.
I like thirds or even less at that point. Anyway, back on the beer. Now we've been diverted for a while.
Yeah, I haven't seen any scores going up yet. I've seen a few descriptions. Where was it? Hopful passion fruit mango and more obvious citrus flavour, perhaps tangerine. maybe more from the yeast than citra. A low white bread malt and quite low bitterness with a dry finish.
Yeah, I like the tangerine call out there. I think that's really nice. I was going to say I was starting to get some citrus notes in the flavour that weren't really there in the aroma. I think, yeah, tangerine's a really good descriptor there. As we say before, we can try to put levels in wherever possible. It can make the sentences be a little bit weird. But yeah, if we try and get sort of low, moderate, high, and synonyms for them wherever possible.
Yeah, it can make them quite repetitive at times as well. But it does help to fully describe the beer compared to just giving a flavour without any intensity. The papaya and pineapple comes through in the flavour, says Richard. Very low bitterness. Avocado in beer would be pretty awful, I reckon. I think I'll probably agree with you, but then again, I'm not a big fan of it in anything. And Peter says he agrees the flavour, we were talking about hops at the time, is not intense, but he would say it's medium-high. For me, I'd agree. It's not very high by any means. I'll struggle to even say it is high. So medium-high, I think, is a good shout. And Keith says moderate tropical fruit and sweet citrus hop. Medium-low doughy and wheat malt. Low bitterness. He does get a hint of alcohol at the end. And yeah, I agree. You can get some alcohol from it. I wouldn't have expected it to be 5.9% though. Not from going from what I'm tasting with the beer, if that makes sense.
There's a bit of bitterness there. I think low is probably about right. It's not as little as there are in some examples of this. It does help balance the beer out quite a bit.
Yeah, it does make this one quite a bit more drinkable than some of the examples where there's none. Or so little it may as well be none detectable. Okay, so David's come in with the first score. Brave person going first. 15 is moderate high hops, and I would prefer some more bittering hops in the mix just to give it a bit more backbone. Richard goes 16 for flavour. It's let down by the hop flavour being at the low end of high. Yeah. Again, valid call. It's at the bottom end of high or top end of medium for me. What do you think, Richard, for the hop flavour?
I'll probably use medium high on the hops. So yeah, I think they're calling out the right sorts of things here. I'm not seeing any of the actual flaws yet. There's maybe a little bit of sugariness to it somewhere in there. I think a little bit, and at least my example in this glass was promising a lot more in the aroma than it delivered in the flavour.
I can see that. Where were we for sweetness on it? Perceived bitterness can be somewhat low. It's quite low. But there was a call out about the the high ester level and low bitterness may give the impression of up to a moderate sweetness, and I think that's definitely worth calling out there, because I am getting perceiving quite a bit of sweetness there, even though I don't think it's a sweet finish. I think it's a combination of the higher ester levels, lower bitterness, just making it feel sweeter than it actually is.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah.
I'm certainly not getting what I would think of as sugary sweet, not when you compare it to, say, a pastry stout or something like that.
No, nothing on that sort of level. It's just a little bit of sugar-like flavour I'm pulling out of it, rather than sugary sweet.
Right, I'm with you, yeah. So yeah, Peter Olding agrees with 15. Lost points on not a high hop. And yeah, I think 15's about the money for this one, to be honest. It's the high to very high hop flavour is one of the standout characteristics of this beer style. And if it's not got that, and that's one of the key characteristics of the style, then it needs to be called out that it's not meeting that. I mean, where are we? Up here, for instance, if we look at the overall impression section, an American IPA with intense fruit flavours and aromas, soft body, smooth mouthfeel, and often opaque with substantial haze. Less perceived bitterness than traditional IPAs, but always massively hop forward. And I don't consider this beer massively hop forward.
Yeah, it's a hop forward beer, but not a massively hop forward one.
Yeah, so I mean it's failing on that initial premise, so it needs to be called out at each stage that the hop flavour or aroma isn't what it should be. I mean, and if anyone from Thornbridge or whatever's watching this, it's a lovely beer. We're not knocking your beer at all. We are just judging it against these style guidelines as if it was entered into a competition.
Yeah,
So
they claim it's a New England IPA.
Yeah. you can claim it's a porter if you want. You're a commercial brewer. You can do what you want. But yeah, for it to be truly to style, it needs more hop in the aroma and the flavour.
Yeah, I agree 15's about the right score for that. Feels about right to me as well.
Cool. So, moving on, we've got mouthfeel. So, as appropriate for style, you comment on the body, the carbonation, the warmth, creaminess, astringency, or other palate sensations, or the lack of any of the above. So, I mean, I'll start by saying I am not getting any astringency. None at all. I wouldn't expect to in this beer. But I'm saying that because it is specifically mentioned as something we should comment on that most people don't if they don't get it.
If you do end up with the versions of these where there's chunks of hops floating around in them, that can often deliver some astringency. So you do get it in the style, or the sort of the classic hop burn type thing comes through as astringency quite often. But in this case, no, I'm not getting any.
Yeah.
So people to put what they're sensing into chat, and you might as well put scores along with it at this point.
Yeah. Richard's saying the head hasn't lasted in his second can either. I mean, I can agree with that. I've literally just got a ring around the edge again. But it did come up nice. Originally, it poured with a nice moussey white thick head that just didn't last, unfortunately.
Yeah, I poured a bit for a second can to try and get what the actual carbonation level was, because the other one had been sat around for a while. And yeah, the head has faded. Not quite as fast as the first one, but still pretty rapidly.
So did everyone get the 4-pack of cans, or did they just get individuals? I know I got the 4-pack. I had one the other evening because I just wanted something smooth, light, and easy to drink. Gave one to my dad earlier after we came back from the pub, and had 2 this evening. And I got to be honest, it is, for a beer that is easy to get, it is a nice example of the style, to my thinking, a nice commercial example of the style that I can get hold of easily and inexpensively. Certainly a lot cheaper than I could brew with the amount of hops I normally put in one of these.
Yeah, this is among my supermarket fridge beers. They usually have this and dry pour.
Yeah.
Why not?
Indeed. I mean, they're 2 of the beers we've done, and, well, they're both the Thornbridge beers we've done on this, and they're both decent beers, hence why they got on the list.
Mm-hmm.
So David Farron says 4-pack, and I'm not working tomorrow, so I might open a 3rd. If I hadn't already had a pint and a half of Butty Bark before coming along, I would have joined you. 4-pack on the second now, 2 more in the fridge. So back to the beer though. None of the negatives, but I would say low carbonation. So the style, medium to medium full body with a smooth character, no harsh hop derived astringency. Alcohol alcohol warmth may be present, but should never be hot. Medium carbonation is standard. The beer should not have creamy or viscous mouthfeel, an acidic twang, or raw starch texture. Well, it says medium carbonation is standard, but that doesn't actually say that it has to be medium carbonation. It's one of the quirks here where they haven't specifically called out a range. Medium is standard, but that does mean that it's allowable outside medium.
Yeah, I still think low carbonation would be a bit weird in this style. It probably would impact all the other areas too much to make it work very well.
I would prefer at least medium. I have had some where the carbonation was bordering on cask level, and I think that is the part of it's the homebrew interpretation of fruit juice for this style, where they try and brew beer that tastes like fruit juice. And because of that, they didn't want it too fizzy. But that carbonation lifts the entire beer. When you haven't got the carbonation there, the aromas suffer, the body suffers, the flavour suffers. So it's always good to at least aim for a medium unless the style specifically calls for a low. For me, this is on the low end.
Yeah.
It could do with a little bit more carbonation for my interpretation of the style guidelines and for my personal preference.
So,
and again, that's worth calling out. There is the difference between personal preference and what the style should be. So many people I've seen in the past, just the opinion, well, I don't like it, so it's not to style, because I do like beers of this style. And that's not the way the style guidelines work. They allow a range of different things. So personal preference literally only comes into perhaps your overall impression.
Yeah, the call out on creaminess is an interesting one, because they can be slightly viscous with the amount of oat or wheat they've got in them, but not in the sort of same way big chewy imperial stout would be. We always come back to imperial stout here.
And I will point out that it isn't always me mentioning them.
Yeah.
Dan's missing tonight, otherwise I'm sure he would have mentioned imperial stout by now as well.
No. But yeah, I'd probably I'd be happy with sort of low creaminess as a descriptor on this sort of thing. There is a sort of viscousness to it, but not as in slimy though.
Yeah, I mean, it's, how can I put it? There's different levels of creamy. There's that really mouth-coating sort of sticky creaminess, and then there's like the pouring cream you get in your coffee. I mean, I think if you're talking like the pouring cream sort of mouthfeel, you're fine. If you're talking clotted cream, you've got a big problem.
Yeah, you've probably got an infected beer as well.
Yeah, and probably a bit too much lactose in it.
Yeah, it's taking lactose too literally and poured cream in their beer.
Well, I mean, it does seem to get to the point now where there's been a fad for putting lactose in so many different beer styles on the commercial examples for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, just because you've got lactose in the brewery doesn't mean you have to use it in every other beer you brew.
I hope they'll get into the end of the load they ordered.
Hopefully, yeah. Talking of Impy Stout, David's great Impy Stout in the fridge that's aged in whiskey casks. It's a proper nightcap beer, absolutely gorgeous. Tell us which one. tell us which one. If you don't already know, and I'm sure there are a couple of people left in the world who don't, I do like a Imperial Stout now and again. All right, so go on, Rich.
So I was just going to say, any other thoughts on mouthfeel while we're chatting away about things?
Yeah, I was just going to move on and just do my mouthfeel verdict, but by all means, you take mouthfeel. I've done a couple of them so far.
Yeah, I think I agree with the people who've scored it so far at about 4. It's at the lower end of medium body and at the lower, just a bit low in carbonation. It's probably a medium low. There's nothing majorly off here, but I'd be suggesting up in carbonation slightly and maybe a touch more body. But it is at the lower end of the strength range as well for the style. So it's not surprising that the bodies are a little bit on the lighter end. Yeah,
totally agree. 4 seems about the money for me too. Again, my main call out would be the carbonation level. I mean, I could live with it as being a medium body. It's certainly not medium full, but I can't live with it calling this medium carbonation. Yeah. It's low. At the top end of low, maybe, but it isn't even at the low end of medium. Okay, so the important bit, on to overall impression. This is where we comment on did we enjoy it and suggestions for improvement. So I think all along we've all been calling out similar things. So let's see what you would suggest Thornbridge do to improve this beer, or to make it more to the style, should we say? Or potentially both, because I think a bit more carbonation would help on both fronts.
Yeah, it's always interesting sometimes to think about this from someone like Thornbridge's point of view, because there is another issue from their brewing a beer of how much does it cost to make this? Because these beers can get really expensive really fast if you put lots of expensive hops in them. So I expect this beer is also constrained by the marketing, the man with the spreadsheet, as well as the brewer, and the fact they need to get it at a price point where they can put it on supermarket shelves without making a massive loss.
And the other point is Galaxy's always hard to get hold of, even if you do contract ahead.
So Nelson.
Yeah. So, I mean, getting hold of those hops in large quantities, even if money's no object, is still problematic. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm definitely getting both the Galaxy and the Nelson in the beer. They're two. I mean, people talk about trying a beer and knowing what hops are in it. But those are 2 hops that I can always, when they're used well, I can always tell about. Whereas some of the others, it's like, I haven't got a clue. Yeah. And it's like, Citra, I can normally pull out. Sriracha Ace, I can normally pull out. Nelson Galaxy, I can pull out. But a lot of the others, they're like, they cross over so much with other varieties. They haven't got necessarily that one key element that makes them stand out on their own in a pile of hops.
Yeah, and then there's year-to-year variation on them, and there's how you treat them that can all impact what you get out of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that if you're spending money on Galaxy and Nelson, you're going to treat them good, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. It's Cranbether from Homebrew House in Monaghan Island. If it's in Ireland, I've probably massacred Cranbether because I can't speak Irish. But I'm going to have to look out for that.
Sounds good.
Aged in whiskey cask sound good. Right, so Peter enjoyed it. Increase the hop aroma and flavour and increase the carbonation. 8 out of 10 for overall impression.
Yeah, you could possibly go a little bit more into what you do to increase hop aroma and flavour. You don't want to go too far into details. I'll probably be talking about changing the hop schedule without actually going into any more detail than that. Amounts and schedule maybe. Increased carbonation, yeah, that's clear.
I mean, it does. How can I put it? There's a couple of different types of people who enter competitions. There's people who are entering for the feedback, who, if you're entering for feedback, you're probably not, how can I put it? You're probably not the most discerning judge of your own beer. And you may not fully understand how to manipulate processes to achieve the desired result. If you're the sort of person who's entering for medals, then you probably don't need to be told how to change your process to achieve something.
Yeah, it's always amusing what other people think you've done.
Yeah.
It's actually, with these more open competitions we've done recently, we've been moderately accurate, but sometimes very wrong.
Yeah, it's been surprising.
It
has. The number of times I've put a suggestion down in these more open competitions, and it's been relevant.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's many times in the past I've put something down and it's been way out there.
Way out of thin air, yeah. But yeah, it's trying to get that balance between something that's usable as feedback versus something that's so specific that it's probably wrong. So yeah, that's why I tend to look at words like modifying your grain bill rather than adding crystal malt, or altering the hop schedule, or look at hop selection, that kind of thing. To be sort of covering my own bases a bit, so I'm not so completely wild about and wrong most of the time.
The other common one that I have seen with people trying to brew these beers is maybe hop selection is wrong, in which case you can suggest changing varieties or revisiting the recipe and point them towards call out, say, try some more newer varieties or new American hops, that sort of thing. Because I have had some where they've had fruity characters, but they've also been a little bit floral, which just was weird. It didn't work.
It's good call out from Keith. You can sort of call out these at the lower end of the everything spectrum for the beer.
Yeah. Could do with more hop flavour, aroma, and apparently higher carbonation and more bitterness.
A bit more of everything. I'm not sure about bitterness. It seems within the range at the moment. But then it's picking out what this is an area where you can write a little bit from personal preference, but we need to make clear that that's not impacting the score.
I mean, I think bearing in mind, if we go back to the original overall impression on the sheet, this should be massively hop forward. It should be intense hop aromas, very high hop flavors. If they brought this up to those sort of levels of hops, I think the perceived bitterness would also go up, just as a side effect of the more hop.
As I was implying before, the price on the shelf would double.
Yeah, it would. It would have to. It's been brewed to its market, shall we say?
Yeah.
And a lot of people in certain circles will diss the beer because of that. Personally, it's fulfilling the role it's supposed to.
Yeah.
It would be lovely in a perfect world to see them double the hopping on this. It would more than double the price of the beer.
I'd love to see it as a special or something though.
Yeah, I would as well. I mean, it's like, what's wrong with Jamestown X or something like that? Because I mean, they do it with Jaipur, don't they?
Yeah.
Jamestown X, yes, please, I will buy that.
Quick, send this off to Thornbridge.
Yeah.
I'm getting a couple of 7 out of 10s in there. It needs more hop flavour and aroma, and a bit more carbonation. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I'd certainly agree with that. I mean, 7 out of 10. Yeah, I'd say that would be about the money for me as well. Perhaps I'll be a little bit harsher on it and go 6, simply because it's not meeting that massively hop forward for me. So for me, it really needs more hops to be a great example of this style. As a beer in a can that I can buy in the supermarket, it is lovely. I'm not knocking the beer at all. But as an example of this style, 6 out of 10 for me. More hops, much more hops, more as late as possible. Get that flavour up, get that aroma up, make it massively all about those hops.
Yeah, I don't think I'd agree with the people on the 7. But we're disagreeing by 8 points. That's it's not a here nor there, really. Remembering that we're trying to judge within, well, preferably less than 7, but we've got some range to play in. So 1 point here and there is fine.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, it's literally only because I'm being very pedantic about that. The entire purpose of this style is massively hop forward, and if it isn't, then to me, it suffers. But that's just me being really pedantic about that point.
Anyone else?
7 out of 10, though. I mean, I wouldn't say there was anything wrong with 7 out of 10. Peter gave it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, again, we're talking like 1 or 2 points. That's fine. As long as you're within 7 overall, then you will get enough points on scoring accuracy to pass. If you're further than 7 out, then you need to look at perhaps bringing your scores more in line with whoever you're judging with.
Yeah, so but if you're judging, when you're actually judging a competition, if you're out by more than 7, you'll talk about it for a bit and just adjust up and down a little bit, if you agree. Because, talking about it often reveals things you hadn't really spotted. And as we said before, if you really can't agree, there is always a senior judge around. There's an organising judge or somebody, depending on how big the competition is, who can come and be a tiebreaker.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said before on that score, even if you're a competition that doesn't have an official head judge, you can always talk to the judge next to you and say, what do you think?
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes that's where some of the best conversations happen, isn't it? When you're just talking over the beer at the competition. And honestly, if you have never been along to a competition, I hope, if nothing else, this series has encouraged you to go along and volunteer, either as a steward, a novice judge, or to become a judge. Because honestly, the experience of judging beer at a competition or being involved in it is such an educational one, and it teaches you so much about beer whilst you have an amazing fun time. So Richard's saying about 40 overall. Keith's giving it a 39 overall.
Yeah, it's in that sort of region. We lost a couple in the top, one in the appearance, 5 or so. Yeah, it's in that sort of region.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say excellent, which is 38 to 44.
Yeah. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this beer. It just needs more.
Yeah, I mean, David summed it up for me there. 39 in total. It feels about right. Agree, it's a very good supermarket beer. We'll be buying again. Yeah, it's great to have in the fridge. It's a great beer. It's not the world's best example of the style. It is, however, a very good example of something that's easy to get hold of. Hi, anything you wanted to say in wrapping up, Rich?
I think that's good for the moment. I've enjoyed this beer. I hope everyone else has.
Yeah, it's one that I tend to keep in the fridge, and I'll continue to do so. And other than that, I think the only thing we got to say is next week, Pilsner Urquell.
Ooh, looking forward to that one.
8:30.
Yeah.
So hope you can join us then.
Cheers. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next time.